Satya Dharma Reflection on March 19, 2022. Disregard even from the disregard itself, often the conclusion that purifies itself. Disregard even from the disregard itself constantly cut through the cutting itself. Don't give exception even to the ordinariness. It's a kind of delusion, a slight delusion. It's the delusion that doesn't show up its power too much, but it's still a delusion. Disregard, even from the disregard itself, it will have nothing to do with being deluded or not all by itself. Naturally, it will have nothing to do with cutting or not. That is the cutting within the cutting itself, which is called cutting that is not relevant to itself, so that it will end all the delusion about cutting or not cutting, so that it will not having anything to do with being deluded or not. Unwind from the searching to see, to know, to focus. Unwind from the seer itself, from the knower itself. Disregard even from the disregard itself, so that it will unwind from the seer and the knower itself. With this, it will discard the unwinding itself as well. Disregard even from the disregard itself constantly. This will be the conclusion that purifies itself. The extinction that doesn't grasp itself, the unwinding that doesn't grasp itself, that is the abandonment for the discarding, just like the flowers that discards its blossoming. It doesn't grasp its blossoming, it discards itself. It's not about grasping. No grasping, even the non-grasping itself. Therefore, let's make a conclusion well. Purifies the conclusion on its own, disregard even from the disregard itself constantly. Let's make a conclusion to help samsara constantly. This is not to grasp the conclusion. That is not a true conclusion. The conclusion must purify itself. It doesn't grasp itself. It's the conclusion that purifies itself. Disregard, even from the disregard itself, it doesn't grasp itself. It's the purifying within itself. The disregard doesn't grasp itself. This is a purification for samsara through the extinction and the emptiness. Don't be obsessed with this kind of mind or that kind of mind. Is the karmic mind, is the vibhag of the mind. uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself. That which has nothing to do with being still or not. Uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself. Why being obsessed with being still or not, indifferent or not, this is all about samsara, all about realms of existence. If we just proceeding with samudchai moving forward, backward, or in its location, it's just samudchai anyway. What is there within anything? This is all about samudchai. The moving forward, backward is still the cause of samsara, still samudchai. Disregard, even from the disregard itself, the stillness doesn't grasp itself, the indifference doesn't grasp itself, the extinction doesn't grasp itself, the cutting doesn't grasp itself. Disregard, even from the disregard itself. The disregard has nothing to do with itself, where with it. The letting go, lets go of itself is not about attempting to let go of anything. Disregard from the disregard itself, this is not about attempting to disregard from anything. Disregard from the disregard itself is not about attempting to disregard from anything. Let go of the let go of itself. This is not about attempting to let go of anything. Disregard, even from the disregard itself. The disregard has nothing to do with itself. This is called the letting go that lets go of itself, the cutting that cuts through itself. With this, it will be the purification without traces, which has nothing to do with directions. So that it will be the purification without traces through the emptiness, without anything to do with directions. Disregard that is not related to itself, well with it. The habits of the attempting to dwell within the mind is a lot, Returning to be still or not, to be indifferent or not, what is it within there? What is it within being ordinary or not? This is still significance and meanings within state of mind, in state of Dharma attainment. This is all about samudchai, causes of suffering and the suffering in itself. Even the disregard is not about anything within itself. It's not related to itself, not relevant to itself. Why being obsessed with giving significance and meanings and involvement within anything, except that it's still a lot of the seed of samudaya, which has very little in the conclusion towards ending. Is the thought that fabricate in itself is create cycle of becoming. The thought that creates samsara within itself, it has no purification to itself. It's still a lot there. Let's purify the thought itself, the intention itself, uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself, the uninvolved that purifies itself. This is the thought that purifies itself. Diligently having a thought that doesn't clarify itself, it will become the vibhak circling in itself on and on. Thinking that it's helping samsara, instead it is samsara within itself. To help samsara, there is only to help give ending for samsara, not to becoming samsara on one's own. The titi must purify itself. The thought must purify itself. Don't be obsessed to create and assume up the titi until it becomes a fabrication, until it becomes cycle of becoming, creating realms and cycle of becoming on and on. Disregard, even from the disregard itself, this is called the thought that purifies itself, titi that purifies itself, that's assume up that purifies itself, the conclusion that purifies itself. Disregard, even from the disregard itself, so that it will purify the attempt to see, to know. Still significance and meanings within seeing and knowing, still involvements in it. Disregard. The disregard that is not relevant to itself instantly. Otherwise, there is no cutting. Being obsessed to cut it, but it doesn't cut the cutting itself. What is there that attempting to cut anything? What is there that attempting to let go of anything? The let go that doesn't let go of itself, it's the samudaya that deceives it. Being obsessed with the path and the result on and on. Even nibbana is not nibbana itself. Why being deluded to yes and no on and on? Being obsessed to create samudaya within the path and the result on and on. Why being obsessed to use something to cut something, the cutting doesn't cut itself. Why being obsessed to let go of anything, the let go doesn't let go of itself. Is there any let go in that? Being obsessed to assume up, but the let go doesn't let go of itself. How can there be any ending? Disregard, even the disregard itself, uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself. Go ahead. That is the let go of itself. Later on, there will be nothing within letting go or not letting go on its own. Without the conclusion that purifies itself, without purification within Titi itself. There's only just adding up of the karmic habits on and on. The knower doesn't purify itself. The seer doesn't purify itself, being obsessed to see, to know on and on. Being obsessed to dwell within seer and knower, always being realm of existence. Constantly purify the thought, uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself. The knower and the seer will just soften down naturally. The attempt to dwell within the seer and the knower will be dissolved. The samudaya will be dissolved naturally, uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself constantly. Uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself. Do not dare to uninvolve with anything. To think that the uninvolved is there is already involvement right there. Uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself. Uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself. This is not about attempting to uninvolve with anything. The attempt to uninvolve with anything is only a titi. It's just a titi, a viewpoint. Uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself. Uninvolved even within the uninvolved itself. So that it will not be being obsessed with the titi. Disregard instantly, disregard even from the disregard itself. Purify the topmost as well. Purify the goodness as well. Don't be obsessed with the topmost on and on. The disregard doesn't grasp itself. Disregard even from the disregard itself. Use it to make a conclusion to purify samsara constantly onwards, to help give ending for samsara. In other words, it's called use it for the blessing. The conclusion of the blessing is about helping towards ending. If unable to bless, is not blessing. It's about taking on the karma and karmic difficulties collectively. The conclusion of the blessing for samsara is to help give ending for samsara. Ending to help end for samsara. If the blessing is not about ending to help one another, it's not called blessing, it's just taking on karma and karmic difficulties collectively. Disregard, even from the disregard itself, simultaneously with everything. This is the natural purification of the extinction. This is not to take in the conclusion. This is about giving the conclusion. The ending is to be given. The conclusion is also to be given for samsara. The ending that is given is to be giving. This is not about taking in the ending for oneself. It is for the blessing instead. Therefore, disregard, even from the disregard itself, at each time of the compassion and great compassion, it is simultaneously given for samsara. The Anupab, mighty force of the extinction, through this purification will link towards all and everything and everyone simultaneously. Let's penetrate through, cut through loving kindness, rejoicing in merit and equanimity. Break through all the frames of methods and ways without traces. Purify without traces, disregard even from the disregard itself. Purify through the extinction, simultaneously with all and everything. Purify all frames and methods and ways. The frame of the delusive attachment totally. This is all about methods and ways of the delusive attachments. It is the delusive attachment that creates it on its own. This way, that way, this frame, that frame. Let's purify it instantly. Disregard, even from the disregard itself. Purify all frames through the extinction. Without well to purify, it's gonna be like cows and buffaloes in the den, creating by one's own way these entrapments. This is the cage that cage one's own self. So purify right away. Disregard even from the disregard itself. Let's purify all the frame of ways, titi, and methods which is derived from the delusive attachment. The delusion that fabricates itself on one's own. The delusion that form up itself. Being deluded to the form up itself. The fabrication that doesn't purify itself being deluded to the fabrication itself. That which is not about anything but being deluded to create something out of it. Therefore, let's purify the form up itself. Disregard even from the disregard itself. The disregard that is not relevant itself, the disregard is not anything in itself. Simultaneously with everything. This is the enlightenment and the blessing is simultaneous at once. Disregard even from the disregard itself, simultaneously with all the senses and sense objects inside and outside, is simultaneous because it's not about grasping as it is. The extinction not grasping itself as it is. Therefore, don't be specific with just extinction because that is not true extinction. The true extinction is not about anything within itself. That which has nothing to do with extinction or not. It's called purification of extinction and emptiness. Don't start to take in anything within itself, within the mind itself. The mind is not the mind. The heart, the mind is anatta in itself. The anatta is not truly substantial in itself. The anatta is not anatta itself either. Dissolve the grasping that is not, that it overlays within the non-grasping itself. Well with it. That which is not grasping in itself as it is. Disregard, even from the disregard itself, that is the disregard that doesn't grasp itself. So that it will not be wrong to the anatta, to the anicca. It's not wrong to the tukkhaṃ, no entrapment. Tukkhaṃ is that tukkhaṃ doesn't entrap itself. Tukkhaṃ discards itself at all times. Tukkhaṃ is anatta and anicca in itself at all times. How can there be the entrapment of suffering? It's wrong. Disregard, even from the disregard itself constantly, then there will not be anything that entraps anything. It will not be wrong to anicca, tukkhaṃ, anatta. Disregard, even from the disregard itself, nothing will be entrapped. It will not entrap the mind or the heart or any state of the mind, nor the aggregates or dharma. Being deluded to entrap on and on. Disregard, even from the disregard itself, purify all frames, all ways, all methods of the delusive attachment. Let's purify all the frames of the delusive attachment. Being deluded to the anatta, to create something from it, on and on. That is the delusion. Being deluded to create anicca for something, on and on. The anicca doesn't grasp itself. The anicca discards itself at all times. Shifting and changing at all times. Discards itself at all times. Bygone within itself at all times. This is not bygone in itself. What is this? Why not yielding to the bygone? The bygone is at all times in itself as it is. Why not yielding to it? What is there that is happening to you? The bygone is at all times in itself as it is. The anicca discards itself at all times. It's bygone in itself at all times. No obstruction in itself at all times. Why being stuck with anything? What is there that being stuck with? Why being stuck with it? Disregard even from the disregard itself. The cutting doesn't obtain itself. Cut through even the cutting itself. Simultaneously with everything. The anupāp or the mighty force of the helping through cutting will be greatly on its own. It's called purification of the extinction and the emptiness as helping. This is not about stillness or indifference, because that is the realm of existence. It's the samudaya, that is the realm of existence. Significance and meanings with indifference is the samudaya of realm of existence. Definitely, it's not about stillness or indifference, because no is not even no itself. Being deluded to yes with any states and conditions without notice. Being deluded to drown within stillness and indifference or ordinariness, because thinking that it is without notice, that is not. That is the ongoing of creating of realm of existence without notice. Nothing is within the stillness, definitely. Definitely, it's not about anything within being indifferent or not, being still or not. This is all about samudaya, the ongoing samudaya. Already mentioned. This is the samudaya in the kind of being there in such a location, moving forward and backward. Samudaya always added in there. Even the disregard has nothing to do with itself. Well to deliberate cut through. Even the disregard is not relevant to itself. Well, with the deliberate cut through to help samsara. Don't let it fall in the lock of stillness and indifference. It's a long-term realm of existence. It's going to be the special karmic payback zone that move onwards. Even the uninvolved doesn't involve with itself. Why being obsessed to align with anything? It's all about realm of existence, states of mind. The states of mind is created as realm of existence. Grasping that which is not about grasping. The Dharma doesn't grasp itself. The state of mind or state of Dharma attainment doesn't grasp itself. Why grasp it? Why being deluded to grasp the Dharma? Grasping something that is not about grasping. Grasping something that doesn't grasp itself. Why grasping the Dharma? Dharma doesn't grasp itself. That's why anatta is not anatta. So don't grasp that which is not about grasping. No grasping, even the non-grasping itself. Similarly, disregard, even from the disregard itself. Even the uninvolved is not involved with itself. This is not just about retreating from the mind or Dharma. Retreat from the retreat itself.